Hello and welcome back to Book and Page. So we are on to part 5 of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is technically part 3 of the translation I have at least. And this part we're going to be splitting into 3 parts because we have our 3-day game that the Lord and Gawain had agreed upon at the end of the last part. So, to go back over those rules, Sir Gawain will stay in the Lord's castle while the Lord goes out hunting, and at the end of each day they will exchange what they managed to catch for the day. This can't possibly go wrong. So, as always, we will start with a quick summary of what happened during this part, and then we'll talk about some things in a little more depth. So, early in the morning, the Lord and his noblemen hop up and they're heading out hunting. And they seem really comfortable around both their horses and their hounds, so you definitely know this is a regular thing that they do. It's not a special event just because Gawain has shown up. So they head on out, and today they are hunting deer. Specifically does, female deer. For some reason the Lord has forbidden the hunting of stags and bucks during the winter season. Whether or not that's to help with the growing population afterwards, who knows? Because last time I checked, both genders of the deer were important for that growing season. But hey, that's his decision, and they're having some real fun hunting some does for the day. Back at the castle, Gawain he's taking a lazy morning. He's lying in bed, sort of dozing, when he wakes up fully because he hears a sound. And he discovers that the lady of the house is sneaking into his room for whatever reason. So Gawain's decision is to pretend to still be asleep and hope she goes away. Unfortunately, this does not dissuade her, and she actually comes right up to his bed, under his bed curtains, and sits on the bed itself, which is just a whole lot of not what you're supposed to do. So, when Gawain realizes she's not going to go away from him feigning sleep, he pretends to wake up fully and be surprised that she's there. They have a lovely little joking conversation where she says that she's caught him and that she's going to trap him in bed so that she can have fun with her prize. A lot of hunting metaphors going on in this section, and in fact, she does keep him trapped in his bed and continuously makes passes at the poor man, while Gawain desperately tries to avoid offending her and also, sleeping with another man's wife. Lancelot. So, they do share a kiss at the end of the conversation because the lady demands it. She's very straightforward about it, despite Gawain actually protesting that while he doesn't want to offend her, he also doesn't want to offend the Lord of the house, Lancelot. So, they do share a kiss, and then the lady finally lets Gawain get up and, actually get dressed for the day. So he heads off to Mass, and then spends the rest of the day being entertained by both the lady and the old crone that we've heard mentioned sort of being paired up with the lady, though she really only gets mentioned off to the side in this section. And from there, we go into a lovely 2-verse description of how properly butchering deer works. Thank you for that. And then finally the Lord and his men return home for the evening with a lot of Venice meat and some happy tales of hunting. He gives Gawain his prize, the best of the deer meat, and Gawain gives him the best damn kiss he can manage. Oddly enough, they both seem quite happy with this situation, and the Lord doesn't question it a bit. Then the part sort of finishes up oddly because we are breaking it up into 3 parts because the end of the first day and the start of the second day happened in the same verse. So they talk for a while, then they go to bed. Which seems a little odd to wrap it up that way, but maybe that's why our author just went ahead right into the next day. Make it a little less awkward for the fact that the Lord doesn't question where Gawain got this kiss at all. So, that summary out of the way, let's talk about things a little more closely. Wow, this section's awkward, huh? Yeah, poor Gawain is stuck in a situation that he really doesn't want to be in, and can't even really enjoy it, the author tells us, because he's sort of focused on the fact that in a few days he's gonna die. I think we can forgive the poor man. But what's really interesting, and one of the more obvious aspects of this section of the book, is we are going to see pairing up of the animals that are being hunted and Gawain's interaction with the lady. So in the first day, when Gawain is not expecting this, the Lord is hunting deer. They're a more skittish animal, try and take flight rather than fight, try and avoid things, bounce around, try and get out of the way, avoid danger type thing. Which is definitely what Gawain is trying to do, from literally playing dead in the beginning by trying to pretend to be asleep, to sort of trying to just dodge every time the lady tries to make a pass at him. We definitely have some deer-like action from Gawain here. He wasn't really prepared for this to happen, and while he can recognize the danger here, he also recognizes that there's some attraction to it. She is a very beautiful woman, and one of the most beautiful women that he's actually seen. He's also the lady of the house, and he knows that if he offends her, that can get him in as much trouble as offending the lord of the house. There are a lot of stories that have this dynamic to it, where the virtuous man denies the powerful woman, and the woman turns around and accuses him of treason, of raping her, any number of things that is going to get the virtuous man in a whole lot more trouble. So Gawain is smart here. He's trying the deer-like tactics of avoiding a direct confrontation by ducking and weaving as much as he actually can. So he figures, okay, let's start with trying to avoid the interaction altogether. And when that fails, he decides, okay, we do have to address it. Let's just try and be, like, super nice and virtuous as much as possible. And maybe she'll take the hint. And this is really interesting because if you look at what he's actually saying, he brings up Mary, the Virgin Mary, and Jesus and the Lord several times. He really is trying to play up this idea of, like, virtue says no, virtue says no, virtue says no. Please, lady, please don't do this. Don't put me into this situation. I am trying to be a model person and a virtuous person. But he also knows again that he can't be too direct about this. We're not seeing a full frontal attack of, like, the power of Christ compels you type of thing. What we are seeing is it slipping in along with compliments to the woman, speaking to her honestly, joking along with her when she starts making these hunting references and saying that she's trapped him. We know full well if he wants to get out of the bed and overpower her to get out of the bed, he can do that. But he's playing along here. He's trying to be very careful, watching where he's putting his feet to make sure that he's walking this fine line between being offensive, not offensive, and not actually getting into a situation he really doesn't want to be in. This is a little bit of a weird situation for us as an audience to watch, of course, because the trapped person here is the gentleman. Now, I've pointed out that this is something of a trope as well, but it's not always a trope we directly recognize. A lot of modern society tells us that a man should never be the one in this position, simply because he does have the ability to overpower the woman, or should have the ability to do so. I say Gawain does simply because he is a knight. He is physically strong. If he wanted to, yeah, he could probably pick her up and throw her across the room and run. But that's not the situation that he's in. His strength in that way is not going to help him escape this situation. And the fact that she's forcing him into it, this should be deeply uncomfortable to us. But in a lot of ways we want to laugh this off. We want to see this as sort of a joke. And sometimes the author sort of leans into that with this idea that Gawain is joking along. But of course, going along with the situation in hopes of getting out of it is a relatively common response to situations we don't want to be in. You don't want to get to the point where the person is going to get angry or violent, if that's a possibility. And in this case, it's not direct violence from the lady herself, but secondary violence from who the lady could actually call in, her servants, her husband when he returns, and all of his court. Gawain is literally sitting in the heart of a community where he has no allies. If the lady turns on him, he is not getting out of this situation. So this is actually a very dangerous situation that Gawain is trying to address using humor, using their shared religion, and using the fact that this is a lady of a court who should understand the courtly aspects and the position she's putting him in. Towards the end of the conversation, he actually asks her directly not to go any further. She actually gets a little annoyed because he is doing this avoidance tactic, right? So when she's finishing up the conversation, we get this section. Then she bade him goodbye, glanced at him and laughed, and as she stood astonished him with a forceful rebuke. So we have the laugh, but again, this is one of those laughs that, with the combination of a forceful rebuke afterwards, this is a red flag laugh. This is one of those laughs where we're like, we're in trouble. Hairs on the back of your neck standing up. May he who prospers each speech repay you this pleasure, but that you should be Gawain I very much doubt. She's calling his identity into question because of the way he's tried to avoid this confrontation that's coming up. So Gawain is like, but why? Said the knight quick with his question, fearing he had committed some breach of good manners. Gawain is scared here. He is well aware of how untenable his position is. And he knows that literally if she decides she's been insulted, this could end his life. And what's really hard for Gawain here is he then has to sort of balance this out with, but I'm probably going to die shortly. But that's also on his virtue, because he's agreed that he'll meet the Green Knight at the Green Chapel for this completion of the game. So it's double problematic if he gets caught up here in the castle and gets in trouble, because one, his virtue here will be directly challenged, but two, his virtue in completing the game with the Green Knight will also be directly challenged. Gawain is aware of what's happening, and he's suddenly desperately trying to keep himself safe. And she's not letting him walk away, which should be a big warning sign to us. But the lady said, "Bless you," and replied, "For this cause, so good a knight as Gawain is rightly reputed, to whom courtesy is completely embodied, could not easily have spent so much time with a lady without begging a kiss to comply with politeness, by some hint or suggestion at the end of a remark." The lady has literally put Gawain in a situation that his dear tactics cannot get him out of, because she's directly called out the fact that he has been walking this fine line and trying to avoid any sexual intimacy or romantic intimacy with this woman who is another man's wife. And she's claiming that courtly manners and politeness actually require that he not only accept that intimacy, but actually initiate it. He, as a knight and a courtly knight, is supposed to want to have a closer relationship with the women he meets. This is red flags then on both sides, because how many women then are being approached in ways that they don't want to be approached, and how many men are forced to act like they want to approach all women this way when they don't. Maybe they have their own wife. Maybe a lot of the other women are wives to other men. This is a deeply flawed concept in courtly love. And this comes from the entire strand that allows the love triangle between Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere to be so revered and enjoyed even to this day. There is this courtly idea that an attraction to a woman in the court is a good thing, even if she is married to somebody else, and in some cases, even if that courtly attraction is not reciprocated. Now, a lot of writers will try and say that this proper courtly love is precisely supposed to not be physical. It is this idea of worshipping the lady of the court as if she were on a pedestal and thus unable to be touched. And while a lot of writers will say this, a lot of writers bend into this idea that it does have to become physical at some point for it to actually be real. What the lady's saying here is you can't actually be courtly until you've been in some way physical with me. You, as the big man, should be asking to kiss me because that's polite and courtly, and it means you worship me on this pedestal. No. No. And what's interesting is this is not just modern views of this issue. This entire courtly aspect of worshipping a lady and the physical aspects to it have always been in flux and questionable. There are stories of, say, Percival, when he is young and very, very naive, who is told by his mother that he should get kisses from women and thus forces kisses on women. In, like, frightening ways. Like, not, I kissed you and it was a joke. I mean, like, grabbing hold of them and kissing them and then stealing their rings, because that's another thing he's supposed to get from women, is their rings. And, of course, that woman in that particular story, no, is not happy. She's very violated. And in a lot of ways, her husband is actually upset with her because it happened. Well, she didn't have an option there. And we're perpetuating the story that the women should want this, and that the men should force the issue. When that is obviously not what's happening. Literally, Guinevere almost gets burned at the stake because of this courtly aspect that everyone is saying should be a normalized thing. Yet the reactions to it, when it comes to light, are not normalized. The women become fully victims, and some of the knights in this case, like Sir Gawain, who could desperately be victimized here in a court of strangers, none of these things are okay. Yet we try and say that we can have it both ways. This is courtly what is expected of you, but you can be punished either way. If you avoid it, or you don't. So Gawain here, when he's directly told this, actually asks her not to. Then Gawain said, "Indeed, let it be as you wish. I will kiss at your bidding. I'm not part of this. This is purely on you, as befits a knight, if this is the story we're going to go with, and do more rather than displease you, so urge it no further." Gawain directly tells this woman that she can force the issue with both the kiss and with more. And then he asks her not to. This is sort of heartbreaking. because the author here is twisting around this courtly love and showing its toxic side from the other side, from the male side, and showing this idea of a toxic masculinity already forming within that courtly love structure, where we're taking the agency from both people in this situation by saying, if you don't do this, you're not a real knight, which basically translates to you're not a real man. Man up and kiss me. It's what you're supposed to want to do. This is not a good message. And Gawain is asking this woman to stop. The issue is that she won't. And the author highlights the fact that Gawain is in an untenable position and is in extreme danger one way or the other by following this section where Gawain is stuck and is forced to kiss this woman. He does kiss her. More properly to say that she kisses him. With that, she approaches him and takes him in her arms, stoops graciously over him, and kisses the knight. So again, he's basically not moving here. Like, this is all of that conversation about needing verbal, clear consent that says yes. He has actually said no, and he is doing nothing to reciprocate here. And she is still insisting. Consent of this issue has gone out the window. And yet Gawain does not have recourse, because the narrator pairs this section up with the following two verses of the men of the court butchering deer. And again, it is two full verses of extreme description of what is actually happening to this deer. And we've established, of course, that Gawain was acting like a deer to try and avoid this situation. And the narrator tells us it didn't work for the deer. They are dead, and they are being effectively skinned and cut up into pieces, and those pieces are being distributed. What will happen to Gawain if he does not walk this correct line? What will happen to Gawain if he refuses the lady or doesn't refuse the lady? How much of the butchering of the deer is a warning that this is directly what could happen to Gawain no matter what decision he makes? Our author has given us a situation, effectively, of possible sexual assault on a man that does not have recourse. Gawain is trapped. And this issue is never going to be resolved. It's never going to be addressed, the fact that he did not want to be in this situation and was actively trying to get out of it. This is just something that he, as a knight, has to accept as a possibility. And that's not okay. The fact that we have this violence paired up with Gawain saying, please don't do this, and the lady insisting on a kiss anyways, this should make us feel uncomfortable. But very quickly we're brought out of that, because the Lord returns to the castle, and suddenly it's a funny joke, because Gawain has to give the kiss he received from the lady, then to the Lord. And this is another funny situation, of course, because courtly love is meant to be between a lady and a knight, not a lady, not a knight and a lord. So suddenly this is all a joke. And they're all, haha, let's talk for a bit and then we'll head to bed because we've got another day of, well, for the Lord of the Castle, hunting. But Gawain has to recognize now that he is the hunted one. And the entire court is going to laugh it off as part of this game. I would not want to be Gawain in this situation. And I think it's something that we honestly have to keep in mind and think about. Because a lot of us want to write off something like this and say Gawain just has to man up. No, that's precisely not what Gawain has to do. The lady has to listen to Gawain and not do anything that he and she don't enthusiastically consent to. And Gawain is not consenting to this. So, day 2 in the next video, Gawain is going to try and change tactics, but this is still deeply uncomfortable and it's not going to get any better. I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.